To live streaming at ISTE 17. My name is Minu Rami. I have the honor and the pleasure of working as a manager on the Education Edition team, and we are so excited to be at ISTE. Oh my God, look at the background and this live streaming stage, and we've even got our mobs. So one of the things that I get to work on my team that I love doing is actually research. I'm a huge teacher nerd and teaching nerd. And anytime I can learn more about research-based practices that transform student learning, I get excited about that. So I could not be more excited to do this live streaming session with two of the experts in the field. And since their work is so deep and large, I'm going to actually let them introduce so I don't mess up live in their introduction. So I have two experts on game-based learning. They do more than that, but they wear many hats in their own capacity. But they're going to tell us a little bit about who they are, what their work is, and some of the things they're excited about sharing in this live stream session. So, Michelle, do you want to start? Jason, start. Okay.
Okay, I'll start. My name is Jason Osborne, and I am the Chief Innovation Officer for Ector County ISD, and that's in West Texas. And I'm very interested in ownership and learning. I'm interested in kids and teachers really taking a part of their education. And one of the ways that we do that is we partner with universities, institutes, and bring the science and bring the real research to the classroom. So gaming is really interesting to me because imagine if we could take data sets like how to map or understand the brain, and kids are using these data sets and marry those up with gaming like Minecraft or other such. So super excited about that, and I'm super excited to be here.
I'm Michelle Zimmerman, and my background started in early childhood education. I got interested in doing things with middle and high school, and as I worked on my master's and PhD, to start looking at gaming in the classroom and what that looks like beyond just saying here's a game that's created for the purpose of education, but games that are made for consumers to just play. How can you take that learning and harness it in the classroom? And I started looking at Portal 2 in the classroom and what learning happened when older kids were mentoring younger kids in that process. That led me to look at more research in a variety of different areas, and that applied to Minecraft. So when we started using Minecraft in the classroom, it had a really nice parallel.
So I'm going to play the devil's advocate or the skeptic that I am at heart about all the buzzwords in education. We hear a lot about importance of game-based learning and one of the ways to reach students where they are, and it ultimately actually helping them in their growth as a student. But what does the research say? Is there any research that educators like me and others at ISTE can actually learn from and rely on? What does the research say about game-based learning in your experience, Michelle?
The interesting thing is when we started looking through research and what existed out there on games in the classroom, there's a wide range of everything from saying it can dissuade kids from learning or it can be detrimental to learning in the classroom to here's some positive things that came out of the classroom with games. A lot of research is inconclusive, and so that could lead some educators to think, is it even worth bringing it into the classroom? However, what I started to find out was that there's a difference between looking at pre- and post-test studies of looking at, for example, science content. Did their science content knowledge improve before they play the game, after the game, versus just using a textbook? And the difference between that type of research and research that looks at the transfer of learning is that we're looking at what happens within the game and how does that learning apply to something outside of the game. So if we're only looking for content knowledge, that question may not be the right question that we're asking, as opposed to children are learning all the time. It's a matter of what are they learning and to what ends. So the fact that they're learning in a game like Minecraft is evident in that they've been able to go from not knowing how to do something to then knowing how to use the blocks or create things or work collaboratively with someone else. But what are we actually measuring? What do we want students to be able to do? So one line of research is looking at the transfer of learning and implicit knowledge. We know that kids are learning things and learning implicitly. That implicit learning can be made explicit through different processes in the classroom. One example is mentoring. So when a child mentors another child, they have to make their own learning explicit enough to help someone else. And that can be a skill that's transferred into a lot of different life situations.
So that's really fascinating that what we find in research is dependent on what we're seeking or what questions we're asking. I also think it's important to note that this is relevantly a new field, right? That we're just starting to implement things like game-based learning at scale. So this is, leaning forward, maybe on the edge, but more and more teachers are interested and they're asking the right questions. And ultimately, teachers are the experts in how they bring game-based learning. So fascinating work that you and your colleagues are doing. Jason, what about you? How do you see motivation come into play? I noticed that in your introduction, that was like one of the key things that you were excited about and learning more about. How does motivation come into play in game-based learning?
Oh, no, it's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. Ownership, it's like the key word. Kids and teachers having a part of something. We all want that in society. We're all interested in discovering things, whether it's finding a fossil or discovering something new, and somebody gives you that gratification that, hey, you did something special. And I think that is, as well as many others, I think that is really, really crucial when we think about education. I think it's really crucial that instead of the teacher being the sole provider of the instruction, that they actually learn together. They build relationships together. And we're proving that with something we developed called PIC Education within ECISD. And we see that, kids, they have so much, there's so much available to them, whether it's gaming or the technology, how they use that technology. It's not the traditional pen and paper and pencil. It's how do we use all these resources? And then how do we give them that question? So one of the many ways that we're looking at it is partnering with universities like Tulane Medical Campus or Howard Hughes Medical Institute or Texas Tech. And then we talk to researchers and we ask them, hey, give us your big data questions. What can we do in our school system to help advance research and science? And when kids have their hands on that, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm something special. I'm able to do something that a postdoc can do in a university. And you just see that development process. They become very interested in their education. That's where that huge ownership component is. And I think gaming will play a really huge important role in that as we go forward. And how do we implement those gaming or those data sets into the gaming world?
So you're actually saying that your students in your district actually help universities and medical institutions actually explore and advance research?
That's absolutely correct.
Oh my gosh.
Which is pretty amazing. Imagine high school kids mapping the brain. They're actually going through an amazing data set that costs millions of dollars for researchers. But there's so many questions in there. There's so many things to learn that not every, there's tons of researchers, but they only have so much, as far as resources within their research lab. So imagine if they were able to utilize tens of thousands, if not millions of students to answer questions, how fast we can advance science. And in the same time, we can marry that up with the standards of teaching. So they have certain standards. How do we marry that up, this experience with those standards and make it cross-curricular and have real-world problems within the classroom? So it's not just this rows of chairs and one instructor. They're working together to problem-solving, just like in business. If you're sitting around a conference table and you're asking each other, okay, here we have a problem, let's try to figure it out. You're doing the same thing in the classroom. It's absolutely amazing to see their eyes, their expressions. The teachers are excited because it's kind of out of the norm and they have a part of something. That's that ownership component.
Yeah, and to me, what's fascinating about it is even if one of our students doesn't go on to pursue medicine or research, they're learning how to ask the right questions. And no matter what field you go in, being able to ask the right questions and how do you go after those questions is an important thing.
No, I want to tag on to that
because
it's absolutely true. But also imagine a high school student that has the tagline on their CV in high school. It says I was mapping the brain and I was working on a Howard Hughes Medical Institute data set, or I was working on the human placenta, and they have this tagline. I mean, research institutes and colleges are going to suck them up.
Yeah, that's amazing. Michelle, I want to turn to you about the question of, sort of marrying of game-based learning and problem-based learning or project-based learning. Is there some research or some interesting work being done around that? Because I often find that educators who are interested in students driving their learning and doing sort of backwards design or problem-based or project-based learning, they tend to utilize aspects of game-based learning in their classroom.
There are several different lines that are working on similar concepts. University of Washington College of Education has been looking at challenge-based learning cycles as one example. There's an area of research that's called design-based research. It was based in the action research field, and one of the goals for design-based research is to come up with multiple iterations of design. So you have a concept, you test it out, you implement it in practice, and then you find out what happened with that, how you can adjust it and redesign. That process is very similar to what kids do in Minecraft. They may have a theory that they're testing out. It may not be something that they formally put as a theory, but they want to try something. And essentially that's what they're doing. They're creating theories. Will this work? Will it not work? They test it out, and then they come up with new designs or iterations on that.
You're reminding me to reach out to the kind folks at University of Washington. I live in Seattle, so I should certainly reach out to them and learn more from them. I'm going to put you both on the spot a little bit, and this is really for my gratification and really the live stream. Because one of the reasons why I got involved in Minecraft is I'm interested in future of learning, not just 6 months, a year, or 2 years down the road, but what it might be even like a decade from now. So I'm going to put you on the spot, and we'll have this on record. So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to make a couple of predictions as experts, researchers, or just curious people in this field. What are a couple of things that you imagine, coming up in the next decade or so when it relates to game-based learning? What are some things that you anticipate as a important figure in this field?
I think some things that we already know about motivation in learning. There's one theory called self-determination theory. When students feel relatedness, autonomy, and competence, they're more likely to persist when things get difficult. Something like Minecraft gives them the ability to have a relational connection with others when they're collaborating. It gives them the ability to feel competent in what they're doing and have autonomy in the choice that they're creating. Those components persist across, it's considered universal psychological needs that all humans have. So as games develop, as different ways of assessing develop, I think that motivation component will remain, but we've been talking about things with big data, and I think that technologies that will exist in the future, more widespread, things like HoloLens mixed reality, will allow for the collection of big data so that we can look at how kids are interacting with others, and we can get a fuller picture and measure that combines both quantitative and qualitative measures to get a bigger picture of the learning that's happening, and to be able to create portfolios in multiple dimensions and visual spatial perception instead of the typical only respond to certain types of tests.
What I find fascinating is you mentioned all the things that maybe John Dewey would have mentioned about constructing knowledge and about having, and about the universal needs for all of us to find meaning in the work that we do, and our students seek that very thing. So while the technology advancing, our essential human needs remain the same, and we ought to pay attention to that.
And that's Jerome Bruner also talked about children being able to learn complex subjects at younger ages and in a developmentally appropriate way. But when you have things like cross-age mentoring where older kids are working with younger kids, or as you're mentioning with everything from neuroscience to looking at how to help solve problems that are going on with diseases, they can start being introduced to concepts much earlier with the technologies that exist and work with others to start building those concepts, the conceptual knowledge, and then work on the more detailed pieces later.
All right, Jason, you're in the hot seat. Your prediction for the future.
Oh, wow.
And we have you on record, so we'll check back with you in a decade.
I think Michelle just hit it spot on, and she puts it so well. But that out-of-body experience when kids are in a game and they feel like they can do anything, right? And like I said, I'm kind of biased to the fact that I think that we'll be able to answer big data research questions and the ownership component. So I'm going to be really short. I think going forward, I think gaming is going to change the way we think. It's going to change the way that we move in society because we will be able to bring in those world challenges through gaming to solve world problems. I mean, it's just I don't even know how else to put it, but
Yeah,
you know,
no,
it's
that's
I just see it going that direction. There's some real it's already happened. There's something called Foldit out there where on protein folding and stuff.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
see more and more of that because kids are really interested in gaming, and I think we just grab it. We take it
Yeah.
and we run with it. And there's still a lot of teachers that are a little afraid of it, but I think just grasping it, going after life's challenges, and give them that ownership.
Yeah, I think relevance. I mean, in my experience as a classroom teacher, relevance is everything.
Yes.
You know, when we make the work relevant to students' lives, their interests, their inquiries about the world, there's nothing that stops them from working hard and working smart. So that's fascinating to think about. So I'm going to hold you both to it. In a decade, I want to sit here. The cameras will change, but the technology will change. Maybe I'll talk to the HoloLens version of you or something. But we're going to check back on your predictions. So I'm going to maybe start to ask you a little bit about, if you got someone intrigued, someone watching somewhere, maybe in Iowa or somewhere about game-based learning, what are some resources that they can go to or some starting place? Because one of the things I find as an educator is it's always hard to start, and we don't have a lot of time. So can you give us a couple of starting points on learning more about game-based learning, where we can go, who we can turn to, who are some people whose work in the field that we should follow?
One thing that's interesting to me when I first started researching gaming in the classroom, a lot of the things that kids need to be able to be successful in games can happen even before you get them involved with technology at all. It's the thought process and trying to identify how to communicate with others, how to see pieces from a different perspective. And those are skills that can get transferred outside of a game, but once they have those skills, they'll get better at it. So even before we started the game, for example, Portal 2, I found out they had a difficult time communicating with each other while they were collaboratively playing. So a teacher could even start by having students practice different types of communication through different types of collaboration before they get into that environment. In terms of things with Minecraft Education Edition has its own website. There are a lot of resources there to get started with. If you're interested in looking at research, there's a man named Sigmund Tobias who did a book that compiled a lot of gaming research that showed positives and negatives, the types of questions that they came up with. Because as a teacher, you know that there are going to be positives and negatives with any type of technology. Even with pencil and paper, people can make something negative out of it. So don't be afraid of trying something with gaming and education just because there are a lot of unknowns. But that means that you're vigilant on your end, just ask questions to find out why kids like things, not just, oh, they like it, so let's keep going with it, but challenging them to help you find the alignment with curriculum and standards that you want. And when they're that motivated to persist in something like that, saying, these are the end goals I want for you, help me get to that point, by giving them that ownership and that sense of control. When you work with them, that'll help them develop other skills, and it may help you find other games that you never knew existed or other ways to connect.
Awesome. What about you, Jason? Do you have some starting points for people who are interested in big data research, or where they can learn a little bit more about your work?
Yes. So I came from research, so I actually worked at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. So I had an amazing network of researchers out there, but you have no idea what's in your backyard, what your local university or college. There's so many ways that you can tap into that resource, and it's a matter of just stepping outside that box and talking to those folks. There's tons of undergraduates that are looking for publication opportunities. How can you approach them and say, hey, how can our kids help you advance your research and create that partnership? You have that mentorship that you were mentioning earlier. They can see that vertical alignment. They can see a pathway and options for them going forward. And it's really hard the way most classrooms are right now. It's how do you introduce, or how do you get them to see that without being a part of it and feeling it? And so, I mean, that's my best advice. Is like reach out. You know, there's always opportunity. Like the more I dabble into this, the more resources I find. And a lot of researchers, they want to reach out, but sometimes they don't really know how to. So there's got to be this mutual ground, and you know, just seeing what's available. Look in your local university, college. What are they studying? How can that align with your teaching and your practices?
So I'm going to make a shameless plug for my team's work. If you go to aka.ms/whitepaper, we just finished a small research project with the help from Getting Smart Group in Washington. And Michelle actually helped out with that research. And we would love for you to download the white paper, look at the research that we found around educators from not just United States, but around the world using Minecraft in their classroom and what they had to say about their experience. So Getting Smart conducted the research for us. We are really excited about what we discovered through it. And this is just our first step into looking into really education research around Minecraft in the classroom. And we can't wait to rely on experts like you in the future to help our push our thinking further and our work further. So if people are intrigued by what you had to say today and they wanted to follow your work, where can they find you on social media or your website? Like me, do you want to put in a special plug for where they can find your work?
Sure. My Twitter is Paleo Explorer. Also, you can find some of the work on pickedu.com, PICKEDU.com.
And you can find me on Twitter at MRZPhD. And my school is Renton Prep, so it's RentonPrep.org.
And you can find my team at Playcraft Learn, and I'm on Twitter at Minu Rami, and we hope that you'll continue to tune in to live streams that we have throughout ISTE. We're trying to bring you amazing voices from the field, and that you'll continue to participate no matter where you are. Jason and Michelle, I can't thank you enough I know how busy your schedules are, so I can't thank you enough for being here and sharing your insights with us. I hope it was a good conversation for you, and thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.